"Is this seat taken?" she asked politely, her voice carrying the careful pronunciation of a child who'd been taught proper manners despite their circumstances. Jessie's heart constricted. The little girl couldn't have been more than 6 or 7, but there was something in her eyes that spoke of responsibilities far beyond her years. "No, sweetheart. Please sit down." Grace settled into the chair with a small sigh of relief, immediately pulling a picture book from her backpack. The cover was bent and the corners worn from countless readings, but she opened it with reverence as if it contained precious treasures. "Are you waiting for someone too?" Grace asked, glancing up at Jessie with curious eyes. Jessie found himself smiling for the first time in weeks. "In a way, I suppose I am. What about you?" "I'm waiting for Mama to finish cleaning the offices upstairs. She works really hard to make sure everything is perfect for the important people who use this airport." Grace's voice carried pride, mixed with a weariness that no child should possess. "She's studying to be a supervisor someday, so she can help other people learn to do good work too." The simple statement hit Jessie like a revelation. This child's mother wasn't just an employee. She was someone with ambition, with plans for advancement, with dreams she was actively pursuing. "Your mama sounds very smart," Jessie said, meaning every word. "She is. She knows about business and management and how to make things run better. She's always writing down ideas about how to improve things at work, but she says she has to be patient and prove herself first." Grace looked up from her book with the directness only children possessed. "Mama says that good ideas don't matter if people don't think you're important enough to listen to." Jessie felt something crack open in his chest. Here was a brilliant child whose mother was being overlooked, whose potential was being wasted because of arbitrary barriers about who deserved to be heard. "What kind of ideas does your mama have?" "All kinds." Grace's face lit up with enthusiasm. "She says the new people who start working here don't get enough training, so they make mistakes and feel bad about themselves. She thinks there should be mentors and better schedules and ways to help people succeed, instead of just hoping they figure it out." "Those sound like very good ideas," Jessie said quietly, filing away every word. Grace studied his face with characteristic intensity. "You look sad. Are you waiting for someone who's not coming?" The question hit Jessie like a physical blow, out of the mouths of babes. "Something like that, Grace. Sometimes we wait for people who can't come back." She nodded solemnly, apparently satisfied with this explanation. "Mama says sometimes the people we love have to go away, but they leave pieces of themselves in our hearts. Maybe that's why you look sad but kind at the same time." Jessie stared at this remarkable child, wondering how someone so young could possess such insight. "You're very smart, Grace. Mama says I get that from her, but I think I get my questions from somewhere else, because she doesn't know where they all come from." Grace opened her book but continued talking. "Do you work at the airport? I know most of the nice people who work here. Miss Gina at the cafe always saves me a cookie when Mama works late. And Mr. Carl from security lets me sit in his office sometimes when it gets too noisy out here." "I do work here," Jessie said carefully, not wanting to overwhelm her with the complexity of his actual role. "I've been here a very long time." Grace beamed at him. "Then you're part of our airport family. Mama says the people who work here are like family, because we spend so much time together, even if we're not blood-related." "Airport family," Jessie repeated, the words settling into his consciousness like seeds in fertile soil. He'd never thought of his employees that way, though he'd always prided himself on treating them well. But this child's simple wisdom was revealing gaps in his understanding, like the fact that he had no idea what kinds of brilliant insights were being overlooked because they came from people society deemed unimportant. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, Grace reading her book with the concentration of a scholar, while Jessie found himself actually relaxing for the first time in months. There was something about this child's presence that quieted the constant ache in his chest, the gnawing emptiness that had become his constant companion. But more than that, Grace's casual mention of her mother's intelligence and ambition had sparked something in Jessie that had been dormant since Emma's death, the desire to solve problems, to use his position to make meaningful changes, to find purpose in helping deserving people achieve their potential. The cleaning crew's shift change announcement echoed through the terminal, and Grace perked up immediately. That means Mama will be done soon. She always comes to find me right after that announcement. As if summoned by her words, quick footsteps approached across the terminal floor. Jessie looked up to see a woman in her late 30s hurrying toward them, her face a mask of barely controlled panic. Amelia Burns was beautiful in a way that took Jessie's breath away, not because of her features alone, but because of the fierce protectiveness that radiated from every line of her body. But what struck him most was the intelligence in her dark eyes, the way she quickly assessed the situation, taking in Grace's relaxed posture and Jessie's unthreatening demeanor before allowing her panic to ease into cautious relief. "Grace Isabella Burns, you scared me half to death," Amelia said, her voice tight with worry as she reached them. "I couldn't find you in your usual spot." "I'm sorry, Mama. The cleaning cart was blocking my chair, so this nice man said I could sit here with him." Grace gestured toward Jessie with complete trust. "He's part of our airport family, and he thinks your ideas about training programs are really good." Amelia's eyes snapped to Jessie's face, and he saw surprise, wariness, and something that might have been embarrassment flicker across her features. "Grace, what did you tell him?" "Just that you're smart and have good ideas about making the airport better," Grace said innocently, "and that you're studying to be a supervisor." Jessie watched Amelia's internal struggle play out across her expressive features. She was clearly mortified that her daughter had shared personal information with a stranger, but also trying to assess whether Grace had been safe and whether Jessie posed any threat. "I'm sorry if she bothered you," Amelia said, her voice polite but guarded. "Grace, you know you're not supposed to talk to strangers about family business." "But he's not a stranger, Mama. He works here too. And he has kind eyes. Look how they get crinkly when he smiles." Grace looked between the two adults with the satisfaction of someone who'd made a successful introduction. Jessie stood slowly, not wanting to alarm Amelia further. At his full height of 6 feet 2 inches, he towered over both mother and daughter, but he kept his posture relaxed and non-threatening. "I'm Jessie Cochran. Grace has been delightful company." Recognition flickered in Amelia's eyes at the name, followed immediately by something that looked like fear. Every employee at Cochran International knew the owner's name, even if they'd never seen him in person. Amelia's training kicked in immediately, the careful neutrality of someone addressing their boss's boss's boss. "Mr. Cochran," Amelia said, her voice taking on the professional tone Jessie had heard from hundreds of employees over the years. "I had no idea. Grace, we need to go." But Jessie could see something more than professional deference in Amelia's eyes. There was intelligence there, and pride, and a fierce protective instinct that commanded his respect. This wasn't just an employee caught off guard by meeting the owner. This was a woman evaluating a potential threat to her child while simultaneously trying to maintain professional boundaries. "Grace wasn't bothering me at all," Jessie said quickly. "In fact, she was helping me more than she knows. I've been sitting alone in this terminal for months, and her company was exactly what I needed today." Amelia studied his face, clearly trying to determine if he was being polite or sincere. Jessie held her gaze, letting her see whatever she needed to see, to understand that he meant every word. There was something about this woman's directness, her refusal to be intimidated despite the power imbalance, that impressed him enormously. "That's very kind of you to say, sir," Amelia said finally, "but we should let you get back to your evening." Grace looked between them with the dawning awareness that something important was happening. "Mama, why are you using your work voice? Mr. Jessie was being nice." "I know, baby girl. Sometimes grown-ups have to be extra polite when they're at work." Amelia's hand found Grace's shoulder, a gesture both protective and possessive. Jessie felt something important slipping away, and before he could second-guess himself, he spoke. "Grace mentioned she waits here every afternoon while you work. That's a long day for such a young lady." Amelia's spine straightened defensively, and Jessie saw the moment when his observation triggered every protective instinct she possessed. "Grace is very mature for her age. She knows to stay where I can find her and not to bother anyone." "I wasn't criticizing," Jessie said gently, recognizing that he'd touched a nerve. This woman had probably faced judgment about her parenting choices before, and she was ready to defend her decisions. I was wondering if there might be a more comfortable place for her to wait. The family area near the executive offices has better lighting for reading, and it's quieter than the main terminal. Amelia's eyes narrowed slightly, and Jessie realized she was trying to figure out his angle. In her experience, powerful men didn't offer help without expecting something in return. The family area is for passengers and their families. We're just airport employees. Everyone who works at Cochrane International is important, Jessie said, and he could see the exact moment when Amelia decided he might actually mean it. Grace is part of our airport family, as she so eloquently put it. She should be comfortable while she waits. But Amelia wasn't finished evaluating his offer. What would you expect in return? She asked bluntly, her directness catching Jessie off guard. The question revealed so much about Amelia's past experiences, about the way she'd learned to navigate a world where help always came with strings attached. Jessie felt a surge of respect for her caution, even as his heart ached for the experiences that had taught her such wariness. Nothing, Jessie said simply. Absolutely nothing, except the knowledge that a bright child has a proper place to do her homework. Amelia stared at him for a long moment, her analytical mind clearly processing his words, his body language, his tone. Jessie realized he was being evaluated by someone whose intelligence had been underestimated her entire life, and he found himself hoping he would pass her inspection. Grace tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mama, the family area has those big soft chairs and the table with the good lights. I could spread out my homework better there." Jessie watched Amelia's internal struggle, seeing the moment when her practical side began to override her suspicion. This was a woman who'd learned to be cautious, probably through hard experience, but she was also a mother who wanted what was best for her child. "I don't want any special treatment," Amelia said carefully. "I work hard for my position here, and I don't want anyone thinking I'm taking advantage." "No one would think that," Jessie assured her, and then made a decision that surprised him with its rightness. "Amelia, can I ask you something?" Her wariness returned immediately. "Yes, sir?" "Grace mentioned you have ideas about improving our training programs. I'd be interested in hearing them sometime, if you're willing to share." Amelia's eyes widened in shock. "You what? You work directly with new employees. You see what works and what doesn't. That kind of insight is valuable, and frankly, it's perspective we don't get enough of in management meetings." Jessie could see Amelia processing this unexpected turn, how quick-mind evaluating whether he was serious or just making polite conversation. "I'm not qualified to advise management," Amelia said carefully. "You're qualified to observe what works and what doesn't. You're qualified to understand what new employees need to succeed. And if Grace is any indication, you're certainly qualified to think strategically about complex problems." Jessie saw the moment when Amelia realized he was serious, when the possibility that her ideas might actually be valued began to seem real. Grace looked up at her mother with hope shining in her eyes. "Please, Mama, I promise I'll be extra good and not touch anything important." Amelia's resolve crumbled under her daughter's pleading gaze, but Jessie could see her making calculations, weighing risks and benefits with the thoroughness of someone who couldn't afford to make mistakes. "If you're sure it wouldn't be an imposition," Amelia said slowly. "I'm sure," Jessie said, surprising himself with how sure he actually was. "In fact, I insist. Grace, would you like me to show you where it is tomorrow?" The little girl practically bounced with excitement. "Yes, please. Mama, did you hear that? Mr. Jessie wants to show me the special family area, and he wants to hear your ideas." Amelia's smile was tentative but genuine, transforming her face from merely beautiful to absolutely radiant. "I heard, baby girl. What do you say to Mr. Cochrane?" "Thank you, Mr. Jessie. You're the nicest person I've met at the airport, and I've met lots of nice people." Grace's joy was infectious, spreading warmth through Jessie's chest like sunlight breaking through clouds. As they prepared to leave, Grace turned back to Jessie with a question that stopped his heart. "Mr. Jessie, do you have a little girl who waits for you somewhere?" The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken grief. Jessie felt Amelia's eyes on him, saw the moment when understanding dawned in her expression, the recognition of loss that could only come from someone who had experienced her own share of heartbreak. "No, Grace," Jessie said softly. "I don't have a little girl. But meeting you today has reminded me how special little girls can be." Grace nodded with the solemnity of someone receiving important information. "Well, if you ever get lonely, waiting by yourself, you can come find me in the family area. Mama says sharing makes everything better." Jessie's throat constricted with emotion. "I'll remember that. Thank you, Grace." As mother and daughter walked away, Grace's small hand tucked securely in Amelia's, Jessie felt something he hadn't experienced in 2 years. Hope. Not the crushing, desperate hope that had accompanied every medical appointment and treatment cycle with Emma, but a quiet, steady warmth that suggested healing might actually be possible. But more than that, he felt energized in a way he hadn't since before Emma's diagnosis. Amelia's situation had revealed gaps in his understanding of his own company, blind spots in his leadership that he was suddenly eager to address. Here was a brilliant woman with valuable insights being overlooked because of arbitrary hierarchies and assumptions about whose voices mattered. He pulled out his phone and called Janet Morrison, the janitorial supervisor. "Janet, it's Jessie. I need you to tell me about Amelia Burns." "Amelia? She's one of our best people. Reliable, intelligent, respected by everyone she works with. Why?" "I met her daughter today, and the child mentioned that Amelia has ideas about improving our training programs. I'd like to hear them." "Oh, she absolutely does. Amelia's been mentioning things for months: better orientation processes, mentor programs, efficiency improvements. I keep meaning to write up a report, but you know how busy things get. Set up a meeting with Amelia for tomorrow. I want to hear her ideas directly." "Really? She'll be thrilled. Amelia's been taking business classes, working toward her degree. She's perfect supervisor material if we ever have an opening." "We might have an opening sooner than expected," Jessie said, his mind already working through possibilities. "And Janet, make sure the family area near the executive offices is properly set up for a child to do homework. Amelia's daughter will be using that space while her mother works." "Absolutely. Jessie, if you don't mind me saying, it's nice to see you taking an interest in staff development again." As Jessie finally left his chair and headed for the parking garage, he found himself looking forward to tomorrow. For the first time since Emma's funeral, a 6-year-old girl with wise eyes and an enormous heart had reminded him that leadership meant lifting up the people around you, that the best ideas often came from unexpected sources, and that sometimes the most important connections happened when you least expected them. The drive home to his empty house felt different somehow, less like a retreat from the world, and more like the end of a day that held promise for tomorrow. Emma's photos still lined the mantel, and her garden still bloomed outside the kitchen window. But for the first time, Jessie felt like those weren't shrines to the past, but blessings that had prepared him for whatever came next. He fell asleep that night thinking about a little girl who called the airport her family, and wondering if maybe, just maybe, he was ready to use his position to make a real difference in the lives of people who deserved better than what they'd been given. Have you ever seen a child who carried responsibilities too heavy for their small shoulders? Tell me about the children in your life who've shown you what strength really looks like. Let me know where you're watching from, and hit subscribe if Grace's wisdom is already touching your heart. The next morning, Amelia arrived at work with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety that had kept her awake most of the night. She'd spent hours after Grace fell asleep reviewing her notes about training program improvements, trying to organize her thoughts into something that would sound professional rather than presumptuous. 3 years of careful observation had given Amelia insights that she'd never imagined anyone would want to hear. She'd watched new employees struggle with inadequate orientation, seen good people quit because they felt lost and unsupported, and observed inefficiencies that cost both time and morale. But sharing those observations with the airport owner felt like stepping into territory she'd never been invited to enter. Janet Morrison was waiting for her when she clocked in, wearing an expression that mixed excitement with bewilderment. "Amelia, I need to talk to you," Janet said, steering her toward the supervisor's office. "Mr. Cochran called me last night. He wants to meet with you today to discuss your ideas about training programs." Amelia felt her stomach drop. "He wants to what?" He specifically asked to hear your suggestions. Apparently your daughter made quite an impression yesterday. Janet's smile was encouraging, but Amelia could hear the underlying question. What exactly had Grace said? Janet, I don't know if I'm ready for this. I mean, what if my ideas are stupid? What if I embarrass myself in front of the owner? Amelia's carefully constructed confidence was crumbling under the weight of imposter syndrome that had plagued her entire adult life. Amelia Burns, stop that right now, Janet said firmly. I've been listening to your ideas for 2 years, and they're brilliant. You see things the rest of us miss because you work directly with new employees, and you understand both the practical and human sides of training. Mr. Cochran is smart enough to recognize valuable insight when he sees it. Amelia took a deep breath, forcing herself to access the determination that had carried her through 3 years of night school and single parenthood. You really think my ideas are worth his time? I think your ideas could revolutionize how we onboard new staff. I think you have the kind of strategic thinking that we need more of in management. And I think it's about time someone with your intelligence got the recognition you deserve. An hour later, Amelia found herself sitting in the executive conference room she'd cleaned countless times, facing Jessie Cochran across a polished table that reflected her nervous hands. But instead of the intimidating power dynamic she'd expected, Jessie seemed genuinely interested in hearing what she had to say. Amelia, thank you for meeting with me, Jessie began, his tone warm and professional. Grace mentioned yesterday that you have ideas about improving our training programs. I'd like to hear them. Amelia opened the folder she'd prepared, her hands steadier than she'd expected. Mr. Cochran, I've been observing our orientation process for 3 years, and I think there are several areas where we could significantly improve both efficiency and job satisfaction. Please, call me Jessie, and I'm listening. Amelia looked down at her notes, then made a decision that surprised her. She closed the folder and looked directly at Jessie. The biggest problem isn't the training content. It's that we're treating new employees like they need to be managed instead of supported. We give them a checklist and hope they figure out the culture, the unwritten rules, the way things really work around here. Jessie leaned forward, clearly engaged. What would you suggest instead? A mentor program, Amelia said, warming to her topic. Pair each new employee with someone who's been here at least 2 years, not their supervisor, but someone who can answer the questions they're embarrassed to ask. Who can help them understand not just what to do, but why it matters. That's an interesting approach. What else? Amelia felt her confidence building as she saw genuine interest in Jessie's eyes. The scheduling is inefficient. We're training people during their busiest shifts, when they're stressed and distracted. We should have dedicated training shifts where new employees can focus on learning without worrying about productivity metrics. And the cost of that would be offset by reduced turnover, Amelia said immediately. We lose about 30% of new hires within the first 3 months. Most of them leave because they feel overwhelmed and unsupported, not because they can't do the work. Better training would pay for itself in reduced recruitment and training costs. Jessie made notes as she spoke, and Amelia found herself relaxing into the conversation. This wasn't an interrogation, it was a professional discussion between 2 people who cared about solving problems. I've also noticed that we don't utilize our experienced staff effectively, Amelia continued. People like Miss Rosa, who's been here 15 years, or James, who knows every corner of this airport, they have knowledge that never gets passed on because we don't have formal ways to capture their expertise. You're suggesting we formalize knowledge transfer? I'm suggesting we recognize that our most valuable resource is the collective wisdom of our long-term employees. Create senior mentor positions with small pay increases for people who excel at training others. Make institutional knowledge an asset instead of something that walks out the door when people retire. Jessie was quiet for a moment, clearly processing her suggestions. Amelia held her breath, wondering if she'd overstepped, if her ideas were naive or impractical. Amelia, these are excellent suggestions. Strategic, well thought out, and based on genuine observation rather than theory. Jessie's praise sent warmth flooding through her chest. I'm curious, What made you start thinking about these issues? Amelia considered her answer carefully. I suppose it started when I realized that my own experience here could have been so much better with just a little more support. I was lucky. Grace motivates me to push through difficulties, but I watched other people struggle with the same challenges I faced, and I started thinking about how small changes could make a big difference. And your business studies, how do they inform your perspective? They've given me vocabulary for things I was already observing, Amelia said honestly. Learning about organizational behavior and management theory helped me understand why certain approaches work better than others. But the real insights come from working alongside people every day, seeing what actually happens versus what's supposed to happen. Jessie nodded approvingly. That combination of theoretical knowledge and practical experience is exactly what we need in leadership positions. The words hung in the air between them, and Amelia felt her heart rate accelerate. Was he suggesting what she thought he was suggesting? Amelia, I'd like to offer you a position as training program developer, reporting directly to Janet, but with authority to implement the changes we've discussed. It would come with a significant salary increase, day shifts, and the opportunity to shape how we bring new employees into our organization. Amelia stared at him, her mind racing. Mr. Jesse, I don't have management experience. I don't even have my degree yet. You have 3 years of perfect performance, the respect of your colleagues, and strategic thinking that's already identified solutions to problems we didn't even realize we had. Your degree work shows commitment to professional development. What you don't have is opportunity, and that's something I can provide. Amelia felt tears threatening, but they were tears of possibility rather than despair. Why would you take a chance on me? Because Grace's wisdom yesterday made me realize I've been overlooking talent right under my nose. Because your ideas are better than anything we've heard from the consulting firms we've paid thousands of dollars. And because I believe in promoting people who demonstrate excellence, rather than just those who check traditional boxes. Can I think about it? Amelia asked, though her heart was already saying yes. Of course. But Amelia, I want you to know, this isn't charity, and it's not because I feel sorry for single mothers. This is a business decision based on your merit. You've earned this opportunity. That afternoon, Amelia found herself in the family area Jessie had arranged for Grace, watching her daughter spread homework across a proper table with good lighting. The space was perfect, comfortable but not ostentatious, clearly designed with children's needs in mind. Mama, this is so much better than the chairs by the gate, Grace said happily. And look, there are books here that I haven't read yet. Amelia smiled, but her mind was still processing the morning's conversation. The promotion Jessie had offered would change everything: their financial security, Grace's opportunities, Amelia's own sense of professional worth. But it also meant trusting that his offer was genuine, that she wouldn't be set up for failure or used as a token to make management feel good about diversity. Grace, what do you think about Mr. Jesse? Amelia asked carefully. Grace looked up from her math worksheet with the serious expression she wore when considering important questions. I think he's lonely, but kind. I think he needs people to care about him as much as we need someone to care about us. And I think he really listens when people talk, which most grown-ups don't do very well. Do you think we can trust him? I think we can trust him to try to do the right thing, Grace said thoughtfully. And isn't that what trust really is? Believing that someone will try their best to be good to you? Amelia marveled at her daughter's insight. Grace was right. Trust wasn't about guarantees. It was about believing in someone's intentions and character. And everything she'd observed about Jesse suggested a man who genuinely wanted to use his power to help rather than exploit. When Jesse arrived at the family area an hour later, Amelia had made her decision. I'd like to accept your offer, she said without preamble. But I have conditions. Jesse raised an eyebrow, clearly amused by her directness. I'm listening. I want to start part-time while I finish my degree. I want clear performance metrics so we both know if I'm succeeding. And I want the authority to implement changes without having to get approval for every small decision. Agreed, Jesse said immediately. Anything else? I want to shadow you for a few days. to understand how decisions get made at the executive level. If I'm going to develop programs that work, I need to understand the bigger picture. Jess's smile was genuinely impressed. Amelia, you continue to exceed my expectations. Yes, you can shadow me. In fact, I think that's an excellent idea. Grace looked up from her homework with satisfaction. See, Mama? I told you Mr. Jesse would say yes to good ideas. Over the following weeks, Amelia threw herself into her new role with the same determination that had carried her through 3 years of night school. She interviewed every employee who'd started in the past year, documenting their experiences and identifying patterns of success and failure. She observed training sessions, noting where new employees looked confused or overwhelmed. During her shadow days with Jesse, Sophie saw the loneliness that came with leadership decisions. It's more complicated than I expected, Amelia admitted during one of their lunch meetings. What specifically? Jesse asked. The human dynamics. I thought good management was about systems and processes, but it's really about understanding what motivates different people, what they need to succeed, how to balance individual needs with organizational goals. That's very perceptive. What else have you noticed? Amelia hesitated, then decided to be honest. You make a lot of decisions alone. You have advisors and department heads, but when it comes to the hard choices, you're isolated. That must be difficult. Jesse was quiet for a moment. It can be. Emma used to say that the hardest part of leadership was that you couldn't always explain your reasoning without undermining the very relationships you were trying to protect. It was the first time Jesse had mentioned his late wife directly, and Amelia felt honored by his trust. She sounds wise. She was. She would have liked you, I think. She always said the best leaders were people who'd struggled enough to understand what others were going through, but succeeded enough to know how to help. Amelia felt a warmth spread to her chest that had nothing to do with professional recognition. Jesse was sharing something personal, treating her as an equal, worthy of his confidence. Jesse, can I ask you something personal? Always. Why did you really offer me this position? I know you said it was about merit, but there had to be a moment when you decided to take the risk. What was it? Jesse considered her question carefully, his expression thoughtful. When Grace mentioned your ideas so casually, like intelligence and strategic thinking were just normal parts of who you are, I realized I'd been making assumptions about who deserved to be heard. Emma always challenged me to look beyond the obvious, to find talent in unexpected places. Grace reminded me of that. So it was about Grace then, Amelia said, trying to keep disappointment out of her voice. No, Jesse said firmly. Grace opened the door, but your ideas and your professionalism made me realize the door should have been open all along. Amelia, you've been developing solutions to problems I didn't even know we had. That's not charity. That's exactly the kind of strategic thinking we need in leadership. Amelia felt some of her defensive walls crumble. I've spent so long fighting to be taken seriously that I sometimes can't believe when someone actually does. I understand that more than you might think, Jesse said quietly. After Emma died, people treated me like I was broken, like I couldn't be trusted to make rational decisions. It took me a long time to believe in my own judgment again. The vulnerability in his admission made Amelia's chest tighten with unexpected emotion. How did you find your way back? I'm still finding it, Jesse admitted, but meeting you and Grace, it reminded me that leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about recognizing good answers when they come from unexpected sources. Their conversation was interrupted by Grace's excited voice from across the family area. Mama, Mr. Jesse, come see what I drew. Grace had been working on a picture while they talked, and she held up a drawing that made both adults catch their breath. It showed 3 figures standing in front of an airplane. A tall man with kind eyes, a woman with a determined expression, and a small girl holding both their hands. It's our airport family, Grace announced proudly. Mama is helping Mr. Jesse learn about taking care of people. Mr. Jesse is helping Mama learn about being a boss, and I'm helping both of you remember how to smile. Amelia and Jesse exchanged glances over Grace's head, both recognizing the truth in her innocent observation. They were helping each other in ways that went far beyond professional development. Grace, that's beautiful, Amelia said, her voice thick with emotion. "Can I keep it?" "I made it for both of you," Grace said matter-of-factly, "because you're both teaching me important things too." "What are we teaching you?" Jessie asked, crouching down to Grace's level. "That grown-ups can be friends, even when one is the boss and one is the worker. That smart people come in all different kinds, and that families don't have to look the same to be real." Amelia felt tears threaten as she watched Jessie's face transform with emotion. Grace's simple wisdom was healing something in him that had been broken for longer than just the 2 years since Emma's death. Over the following weeks, Amelia's mentor program began to take shape. She paired experienced employees with newcomers, created training schedules that actually made sense, and developed evaluation processes that measured understanding rather than just completion of tasks. But it was during a particularly challenging implementation meeting that Amelia truly found her voice as a leader. "The supervisors are resistant to the mentor program," Janet reported during their weekly update. "They're worried about productivity losses and additional paperwork." Amelia had anticipated this resistance, and she'd prepared accordingly. "Janet, can you set up a meeting with the supervisory staff? I'd like to address their concerns directly." "Are you sure you're ready for that?" Janet asked. "Some of them have been here a lot longer than you have, and they're not thrilled about taking direction from someone who was cleaning offices 6 months ago." "Unsure," Amelia said firmly. "If I can't convince my peers that these programs are worthwhile, then either the programs need work or I'm not the right person for this job." The supervisors' meeting was as challenging as Amelia had expected. 5 department heads, all with more seniority than she had, sat around the conference table with expressions ranging from skeptical to openly hostile. "Amelia, we appreciate the enthusiasm," said Marcus Wedd from maintenance. "But some of us have been managing people since before you worked here. We know what works." "You're absolutely right," Amelia replied calmly. "You do know what works in your departments. That's exactly why I need your input to make these programs successful." The unexpected response caught Marcus off guard. "What do you mean?" "I mean that I've identified problems, but you have the expertise to solve them. The mentor program only works if experienced people like you help design it. I'm not here to impose solutions. I'm here to facilitate better outcomes." Amelia opened her presentation folder with confidence she'd never felt in a professional setting before. "Marcus, your department has the lowest turnover rate in the airport. What are you doing differently that we could adapt for other areas?" The question shifted the dynamic immediately. Instead of defending territory, Marcus found himself sharing strategies that had worked for him. Other supervisors began contributing their own successes and challenges. The problem isn't resistance to change, Amelia realized as the conversation progressed. The problem is that you've all developed effective informal systems, but we've never documented or shared them across departments. "Exactly," said Linda Chen from security. "I've been doing unofficial mentoring for years, but it's all word of mouth and personal relationships." "What if we formalized what you're already doing?" Amelia suggested. "Made it official, gave you credit for the expertise you've developed, and created ways to share successful strategies across departments." By the end of the meeting, the supervisors weren't just supporting Amelia's programs, they were helping to design them. She'd transformed potential opposition into collaborative partnership by recognizing and respecting their expertise. "That was masterfully handled," Jessie said, when Amelia briefed him on the meeting later. "You turned resistance into buy-in by making them partners instead of subjects." "I learned that from watching you," Amelia admitted. "You never make people feel stupid for having concerns. You find ways to address the underlying issues while preserving their dignity." Jessie felt something warm and complex stir in his chest. Amelia wasn't just implementing training programs. She was becoming a leader in her own right, developing her own style and philosophy based on intelligence and empathy rather than authority and control. "Amelia, I have a confession to make," Jessie said, his voice more serious than usual. "What's that?" "When I offered you this position, I thought I was doing you a favor, but watching you work these past weeks, seeing how you approach problems and manage relationships, I realize you're doing me the favor." You're making this organization better in ways I couldn't have imagined." Amelia felt heat rise in her cheeks, but this time it was pride rather than embarrassment. "Thank you. That means more than you know." "There's something else," Jesse continued. "The board is creating a new position, Director of Employee Development. It would oversee all training, mentoring, and advancement programs across the airport. I'd like you to consider applying for it." Amelia's breath caught. "Jesse, that's a huge leap from where I started 6 months ago." "It's the logical next step for someone who's already doing the work," Jesse corrected. "Amelia, you've proven you can identify problems, develop solutions, and implement change while building consensus. Those are exactly the skills we need for this position. And if I fail? Then we'll figure out what went wrong and try again," Jesse said simply. "But Amelia, I don't think you're going to fail. I think you're going to exceed everyone's expectations, including your own." That evening, as Amelia and Grace walked to their car, after another successful day in the family area, Grace looked up at her mother with curious eyes. "Mama, you look different lately." "Different how, baby girl?" "Happier, prouder, like you remember that you're really smart and capable, instead of just hoping other people will notice." Amelia stopped walking and crouched down to Grace's level. "What made you think of that?" "Because when you talk to Mr. Jesse now, you use your smart voice instead of your careful voice. And when you smile, it reaches all the way to your eyes instead of just your mouth." Amelia pulled Grace into a hug, marveling at her daughter's perceptiveness. Grace was right. Something fundamental had shifted in how Amelia saw herself and her place in the world. For the first time in years, she wasn't just surviving or even just succeeding. She was thriving, using her intelligence and skills to make a real difference. "Grace, do you know what the best part is about my new job?" "What?" "It's not just that I get to help other people succeed. It's that I finally understand my own worth, and I have the courage to act on it." "Good," Grace said with satisfaction, "because Mr. Jesse sees how smart you are, and it makes him happy to work with someone who challenges him to be better too." As they drove home through the evening traffic, Amelia reflected on how completely her life had transformed. 6 months ago, she'd been a single mother, cleaning offices and hoping for a better future. Now she was a respected professional, with the opportunity to shape policy and advance her career in ways she'd never dared to imagine. But more than the professional advancement, it was the restoration of her confidence that mattered most. Jesse hadn't just given her a job. He'd helped her remember who she was, beneath the caution and self-doubt that years of struggle had created. And increasingly, Amelia found herself wondering if Jesse was finding similar restoration in their growing partnership. The lonely man who'd sat in Terminal C, watching life pass him by, was becoming someone engaged and purposeful. Someone who seemed to genuinely enjoy the challenges of leadership when he had the right people to share them with. What would you do if someone offered to change your child's entire future? Share your thoughts about trust and second chances in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for tomorrow's episode. The thought that followed surprised her with its intensity. She was beginning to care about Jesse Cochran, not just as Grace's father figure or her professional mentor, but as a man whose happiness mattered to her in ways that had nothing to do with what he could provide for their family. The realization was both thrilling and terrifying, but as Grace chattered happily in the back seat about her homework and her friends and her plans for the weekend, Amelia allowed herself to imagine a future where professional partnership might grow into something deeper and more lasting. After all, Grace had been right about so many things already. Maybe she was right about airport families becoming real families too. 3 months into Amelia's new role as training program developer, the changes she'd implemented were showing remarkable results. Employee retention had improved by 40%, and new hire satisfaction scores had reached all-time highs. But more than the statistics, Amelia could see the difference in daily interactions. New employees looked less stressed. Experienced workers took pride in their mentoring roles. And the entire organizational culture felt more supportive and collaborative. Amelia found herself arriving at work each morning with anticipation, rather than anxiety. eager to tackle new challenges and build upon the successes they'd already achieved. The director of employee development position Jessie had mentioned was becoming more than an opportunity. It was starting to feel like her destiny. But it was during a routine training session observation that Amelia encountered her first major crisis as a leader. She was watching Maria Santos, a new cleaning crew member, work alongside her mentor Rosa Martinez, when she noticed that Maria seemed unusually distressed. The young woman's hands were shaking, and she kept glancing nervously toward the executive offices. "Maria, are you feeling all right?" Amelia asked during a break. Maria's eyes filled with tears. "Miss Amelia, I think I'm going to get fired." "Why would you think that?" "Yesterday, I was cleaning Mr. Henderson's office when he got a phone call. He started yelling about immigration enforcement coming to the airport next week. He said they were going to clean house and get rid of anyone whose paperwork wasn't perfect." Maria's voice dropped to a whisper. "Miss Amelia, my documentation is legal, but my English isn't perfect, and I'm scared they'll assume I don't belong here." Amelia felt anger flare in her chest. Jack Henderson was the operations manager, and his casual cruelty toward employees he considered beneath him had been a persistent problem. But this was the first time Amelia had heard about planned immigration enforcement, and something about the situation felt wrong. "Maria, I need you to tell me exactly what you heard," Amelia said gently. As Maria recounted the conversation, Amelia's analytical mind began processing the information. Henderson's description of the enforcement action didn't match standard protocols, and his gleeful anticipation suggested something more personal than official policy. "Rosa, can you take Maria for coffee while I make some phone calls?" Amelia asked, her decision crystallizing with startling clarity. Amelia's first call was to Carl Hackman in security. "Hi, it's Amelia. I need to ask you something confidential. Are you aware of any planned immigration enforcement actions at the airport?" "No, and I would be. That kind of operation requires coordination with airport security." "Why?" Amelia explained what Maria had overheard, and Carl's response was immediate. "Amelia, that sounds like Henderson is either planning something unofficial or trying to scare employees into quitting. Either way, it's a problem. What should I do?" "Document everything Maria told you, and then we need to talk to Jessie. This could be a legal issue as well as an employee relations problem." Amelia's second call was to her friend Aaliyah, who worked in passenger services and had connections throughout the airport's informal communication networks. "Aaliyah, I need you to listen carefully and tell me if you've heard any rumors about immigration enforcement targeting employees." "Girl, I haven't heard anything official, but Henderson's been making comments about cleaning up the workforce for weeks. Some of the Latino employees are scared, and a few people have actually quit rather than risk trouble." "That's what I was afraid of," Amelia said grimly. "Aaliyah, can you quietly let people know that if anyone has concerns about workplace harassment or intimidation, they should come to me directly?" "You sure you want to take on Henderson? He's got friends in management, and he doesn't like being challenged." "I'm sure," Amelia said with more confidence than she felt. "This is exactly why we created these programs, to make sure every employee feels safe and supported." Amelia's third call was the one that required the most courage. She dialed Jesse's direct line, knowing that what she was about to tell him could have serious implications for the entire organization. "Jesse, I need to brief you on a situation that requires immediate attention," Amelia said when he answered. "I'm in my office. Can you come up now?" 10 minutes later, Amelia sat across from Jesse in his office, laying out the facts with the professional clarity she'd developed over the past months. "So Henderson is either planning unauthorized action against employees, or he's using fear tactics to force resignations," Jesse said when she finished. "Either way, it's unacceptable." "I think it's fear tactics," Amelia said. "The details Maria heard don't match how real enforcement actions work. But Jesse, the damage is already done. People are scared, and some have already quit good jobs because they think they're not safe here." Jesse's expression was grim. "What do you recommend?" Amelia had been thinking about this question since her conversation with Maria, and she had a clear plan. "First, we need to investigate Henderson's actions and make it clear that intimidation won't be tolerated. Second, we need to reassure our workforce that their safety and dignity are priorities. And third, We need to create formal protections so this doesn't happen again. Specific recommendations, an all-staff meeting to clarify our non-discrimination policies and commitment to employee rights. A formal grievance process for reporting harassment, and if the investigation confirms that Henderson was using intimidation tactics, he needs to face consequences that make it clear this behavior won't be tolerated. Jesse nodded approvingly. Amelia, you've identified the problems and developed solutions. I want you to lead this response. Me? Amelia felt a flutter of nervousness. Jesse, this is a major personnel issue. Shouldn't it come from you or Janet? It should come from the person who discovered it, investigated it thoroughly, and developed a comprehensive response plan, Jesse said firmly. Amelia, this is exactly the kind of leadership we need. You saw a problem, you gathered facts, and you're ready to act. That's not just management, that's moral courage. What if I handle it wrong? What if people don't respond well to someone so new taking charge of something this serious? Jesse leaned forward, his expression serious but encouraging. Amelia, 3 months ago you were afraid to share your ideas about training programs. Today you're ready to take on workplace harassment and protect vulnerable employees. You've earned the authority to address this situation, and you have my complete support. Amelia felt something settle into place in her chest. Not just confidence, but conviction. All right, I'll need HR support for the investigation, and I want Carl involved for security oversight. Done. What else do you need? I want to meet with the affected employees personally, not just send a memo. People need to see that their concerns are being taken seriously by leadership they can actually talk to. Agreed. Amelia, I'm proud of how you're handling this. The all-staff meeting Amelia organized for the following day was unlike anything the airport had seen before. Instead of a typical top-down announcement, Amelia created an open forum where employees could ask questions and share concerns. Some of you have heard rumors about enforcement actions targeting airport employees. Amelia began, her voice carrying clearly through the packed conference room. I want to address those rumors directly and clearly. Amelia laid out the facts without naming Henderson specifically, but made it clear that any employee who used fear tactics or intimidation would face serious consequences. She outlined the new grievance process and provided multiple ways for people to report concerns safely. But it was when Maria Santos stood up during the question period that the meeting became truly powerful. Miss Amelia, Maria said in careful English, before you helped me, I was ready to quit a job I love because I was scared. Now I know that someone in leadership cares about people like me. Thank you for making us feel safe. The applause that followed was genuine and sustained, and Amelia saw tears in the eyes of several employees who had clearly been carrying similar fears. After the meeting, Jesse found Amelia in her office, looking exhausted but satisfied. That was masterfully handled, he said. You didn't just address the immediate problem, you strengthened trust between management and staff. It felt right. Amelia said simply, these are good people who deserve to feel safe at work. No one should have to choose between their job and their peace of mind. Henderson has been placed on administrative leave pending the investigation, Jesse reported. HR found evidence that he's been making intimidating comments to multiple employees over several months. Good, Amelia said firmly. Jesse, I know he has seniority and connections, but we can't let this slide. If we don't follow through with real consequences, everything we said today becomes meaningless. I agree completely. Amelia, you've shown more leadership in this crisis than some managers show in entire careers. The board is meeting next week to approve the Director of Employee Development position. I'm recommending you for it, and after today, I can't imagine they'll have any objections. Amelia felt a surge of satisfaction that had nothing to do with career advancement and everything to do with knowing she'd made a real difference. Thank you. But Jesse, I want you to know, I didn't handle this crisis to prove myself. I handled it because it was the right thing to do. I know, Jesse said softly. That's exactly why you're the right person for the job. Later that evening, as Amelia picked up Grace from the family area, she found her daughter working on homework with unusual concentration. What are you working on so seriously? Amelia asked. A writing assignment about heroes, Grace replied. I'm writing about you. Me? Amelia was surprised. Why me? Grace looked up with eyes that seemed far too wise for her age. Because today you protected people who couldn't protect themselves. Miss Rosa told me how you made sure Maria felt safe, and how you stood up to the mean manager who was scaring people. Amelia felt her throat tighten with emotion. Grace, I was just doing my job. No, Mama. Your job is training programs. Today you did something bigger. You used your power to help people who don't have power. That's what heroes do. As they walked through the terminal toward the parking garage, Amelia reflected on how much her life had changed. A year ago, she would never have imagined having the authority or confidence to challenge a senior manager, to lead an all-staff meeting, or to shape policy that affected hundreds of people. Of more than the professional growth, it was the sense of purpose that mattered most. She wasn't just building a career, she was making a difference in ways that aligned with her deepest values. Mama, Grace said as they reached the car. Mr. Jesse looked really proud of you today when I saw him after the meeting. Did he? Really proud, the kind of proud that's not just about work stuff, but about who you are as a person. Grace studied her mother's face with characteristic insight. I think he's starting to love you, the way you're starting to love him. Amelia felt her breath catch. Grace, what makes you say that? Because you both get that soft look in your eyes when you talk about each other. And because when you work together, you both become better versions of yourselves. Grace said this with the matter-of-fact tone she used for obvious truths. Plus, you smile different now, like you're happy from the inside, instead of just trying to be happy on the outside. Amelia realized that Grace was right. Over the past months, her relationship with Jesse had evolved beyond professional partnership into something deeper and more complex. She looked forward to their meetings, not just because of the work they accomplished, but because of the way he listened to her ideas, the way he supported her growth, the way he treated her as an equal, despite their different backgrounds. And increasingly, she found herself caring about Jesse's well-being in ways that had nothing to do with Grace's needs or her own career advancement. She wanted him to be happy, to find purpose again, to discover that life after loss could still hold joy and meaning. Grace, what would you think if Mr. Jesse became more than just our airport family? What if he became family? Grace's face lit up with uncontainable joy. You mean like a daddy for me and a husband for you? Hypothetically, Amelia said carefully. Mama, I've been hoping for that since the first day I met him. He needs us as much as we need him, and when we're all together, we feel like a real family instead of just people who care about each other. That night, as Amelia reviewed her notes for the next day's training sessions, she found herself thinking about the future in ways she hadn't allowed herself to consider before. For 3 years, she'd focused entirely on survival and Grace's needs, putting her own desires for companionship and love on permanent hold. But Jesse had shown her that she didn't have to choose between being a good mother and being a woman with her own dreams and needs. He supported her professional growth while clearly adoring Grace. He treated their little family unit as precious rather than inconvenient. And if Grace was right about the way he looked at her, maybe it was time to stop being afraid of wanting something beautiful for herself as well as for her daughter. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. But as Grace's soft breathing indicated, she'd fallen asleep. Amelia allowed herself to imagine a future where professional partnership might grow into personal partnership, where the family they'd built around Grace's needs might expand to include the kind of love between adults that she thought she'd never trust again. After all, Grace had been right about so many things already. Maybe she was right about love too. The Henderson investigation revealed even more troubling behavior than Amelia had initially suspected. Over the past year, he had systematically targeted employees he perceived as vulnerable: immigrants, single mothers, younger workers, using subtle intimidation tactics designed to make them quit rather than face formal disciplinary action. The board meeting to approve the Director of Employee Development position was scheduled for a Thursday morning in November. Amelia spent the previous evening preparing a presentation that outlined not just her qualifications, but her vision for creating an organizational culture where every employee could thrive. You're going to do brilliantly, Jesse assured her as they reviewed her materials one final time. I hope so, Amelia said, her nervousness showing despite her professional demeanor. This position could change everything for Grace and me. Amelia, This position could change everything for this entire organization. You've already proven you can identify problems and implement solutions. Tomorrow, you're just helping the board understand what they're gaining by promoting you." Amelia looked up from her notes, studying Jesse's face with the directness that had become characteristic of their interactions. "Jesse, can I ask you something?" "Always." "When you look at me now, do you still see the cleaning woman who is afraid to speak up, or do you see someone capable of real leadership?" The question revealed Amelia's ongoing struggle with imposter syndrome, her need for reassurance that her rapid advancement was based on merit rather than charity. Jesse felt his heart ache for the experiences that had taught her to doubt her own worth. "Amelia, when I look at you now, I see one of the most capable leaders I've ever worked with. I see someone who combines intelligence with empathy, someone who can think strategically while never losing sight of the human impact of decisions. I see someone I trust completely with the most important aspects of this organization." Amelia felt tears threaten at the sincerity in his voice. "Thank you. I needed to hear that." "There's something else I see when I look at you," Jesse continued, his voice softening. "What's that?" "I see someone who's taught me that it's possible to find purpose again after thinking your meaningful life was over. Someone who's shown me that the best partnerships are built on mutual respect and shared values rather than just convenience or attraction." The words hung between them, laden with implications that neither was quite ready to address directly. Amelia felt her pulse quicken, but before she could respond, Grace appeared in the doorway of the family area. "Mama, are you ready to go home? I finished all my homework, and I want to practice my presentation for tomorrow too." "Your presentation?" Amelia asked. Grace beamed with pride. "Miss Jenkins asked everyone in our class to present about someone we admire. I'm presenting about you and how you became a boss by being smart and kind and brave." Jesse felt his chest tighten with emotion, watching Amelia's face transform with maternal pride and love. The bond between mother and daughter was beautiful to witness. But more than that, it represented the kind of family devotion he'd always wanted to experience. The next morning, Amelia's presentation to the board exceeded everyone's expectations. She outlined comprehensive plans for employee development, retention strategies, and cultural improvements that demonstrated both visionary thinking and practical implementation skills. "Ms. Burns," said board member Rose Walsh, "your proposals suggest significant budget increases for training and development programs. How do you justify these costs?" Amelia had anticipated this question. "Mrs. Walsh, our current turnover rate costs us approximately $2 million annually in recruitment, training, and lost productivity. My projections show that investing $800,000 in comprehensive development programs will reduce turnover by 60%, generating net savings of over $1 million, while dramatically improving employee satisfaction and organizational effectiveness. And you're confident you can achieve these results?" asked board member David Kumar. "I'm confident because we've already seen significant improvements from the pilot programs we've implemented. Employee retention in participating departments has improved by 47%, and satisfaction scores have reached all-time highs. We're not projecting hypothetical results. We're scaling proven successes." The board members exchanged impressed glances. This wasn't just ambition or good intentions. This was strategic thinking backed by measurable results. "Ms. Burns," said Board Chair Margaret Stevens, "you've presented the most comprehensive employee development strategy we've seen in my 15 years on this board. The position is yours, effective immediately, with our full support for implementation of your proposed programs." Amelia felt a surge of triumph that was both professional and deeply personal. She had earned this position through her own efforts, her own ideas, her own courage to speak up and take action when it mattered most. After the meeting, Jesse found Amelia in her new office, a space with windows overlooking the terminal where their story had begun. She was standing at the window, watching the constant flow of travelers, but her expression was contemplative rather than overwhelmed. "Congratulations, Director Burns," Jesse said with genuine warmth. Amelia turned to face him, her smile radiant with accomplishment and possibility. "Thank you, and thank you for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. Amelia, you earned this entirely on your own merit. I may have opened some doors, but you walked through them and proved you belonged there. I know, Amelia said, and Jessie could hear the confidence in her voice. For the first time in my adult life, I truly know my own worth. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, both aware that they had reached a turning point, not just in Amelia's career, but in their relationship. The professional mentorship that had brought them together was evolving into something deeper and more complex. Jessie, Amelia said carefully, Grace asked me something last night that I've been thinking about. What did she ask? She wanted to know when you and I were going to stop pretending we were just colleagues and admit that we care about each other in ways that have nothing to do with work. Jessie felt his breath catch. What did you tell her? I told her that sometimes adults need time to figure out their feelings, even when those feelings are obvious to 6-year-olds. Amelia's smile was tentative but genuine. But Jessie, I don't want to take so much time figuring things out that I miss something beautiful. Jessie stepped closer, close enough that Amelia could see the hope and vulnerability in his eyes. Amelia, what are you saying? I'm saying that over these past months, you've become one of the most important people in my life. Not just because of what you've done for Grace and me professionally, but because of who you are, your kindness, your integrity, the way you listen when people talk, the way you use your position to lift others up rather than just accumulate power. Jessie reached for her hands, intertwining their fingers in a gesture that felt both natural and momentous. Amelia, I need you to know that my feelings for you are completely separate from my love for Grace, even though they're both absolutely real. You're not just Grace's mother to me. You're the one who's taught me that it's possible to love again, to hope again, to believe in futures I thought were impossible. I love you too, Amelia said simply, the words carrying all the trust and hope she'd been afraid to acknowledge. Jessie cupped her face gently in his hands, his thumbs tracing the curve of her cheekbones. Are you sure? Because once we cross this line, there's no going back to just being colleagues. Jessie, we crossed that line months ago when you started caring about Grace's homework and I started caring about your happiness. We've been building something real this whole time. We're just finally admitting it. When Jessie kissed her, it was with the reverence of someone who'd thought he'd never love again, discovering that the heart's capacity for joy was infinite. Amelia responded with the passion of a woman who'd learned to trust her own judgment about what was worth risking everything for. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jessie rested his forehead against Amelia's. So what happens now? Amelia asked softly. Now we tell Grace that her airport family is about to become a real family, Jessie said, and we start planning a future that's even better than what we've imagined separately. Daddy, Grace's delighted voice rang out from the office doorway. Neither adult had heard her approach, but her timing was perfect as always. Grace, we were just, Amelia began, finally kissing like people who love each other. Grace finished happily. I was wondering when you two would figure that out. I've been ready for you to be my daddy and mama's husband for months now. Jessie crouched down to Grace's level, his heart full of love for this wise, wonderful child who had changed his entire world. Grace, how would you feel if I asked your mama to marry me? I would feel like the luckiest girl in the world, Grace said seriously. But Daddy, you have to do it right. Mama deserves a proper proposal with flowers and pretty words and maybe some fancy jewelry. Amelia laughed through happy tears. Grace Isabella, when did you become an expert on proposals? I've been planning yours since the day I met Mr. Jessie, Grace said matter-of-factly. I knew he was going to be my daddy and your husband, eventually, so I wanted to make sure he did everything perfectly. Jessie and Amelia exchanged amazed glances over Grace's head. Their daughter, and she was already their daughter in every way that mattered, had been orchestrating their love story from the very beginning. Grace, sweetheart, what exactly have you been planning? Jessie asked, both amused and deeply touched. Grace pulled a folded paper from her backpack with the solemnity of someone revealing important documents. I drew pictures of where you should propose, what kind of ring Mama would like, and what you should say to make her cry happy tears. Amelia unfolded the paper to find detailed drawings labeled, "Best places for Daddy to ask Mama to marry him." The illustrations showed the family area where they'd spent so much time, the chair where Grace had first approached Jesse, and surprisingly, the executive conference room where Amelia had presented her training ideas. "Grace, why the conference room?" Amelia asked. "Because that's where you became partners for real," Grace explained. "That's where Daddy learned how smart you are, and you learned how much he believed in you. I think that's when you both started falling in love, even if you didn't know it yet." Jesse felt his throat constrict with emotion. This remarkable child had been observing their relationship with wisdom that exceeded her years, recognizing the significance of moments they'd been too cautious to acknowledge. "There's more," Grace announced, pulling out another paper. "I also made a list of all the reasons why you two should get married." "Let's hear it," Amelia said, sitting down so she could look at Grace's list properly. Grace cleared her throat importantly. "Number 1, you both make each other laugh in ways that reach your eyes. Number 2, Mama is happier and more confident when Daddy is around. Number 3, Daddy is less lonely and more excited about life when we're his family. Number 4, you both want to take care of people and make the world better. Number 5, I need a daddy who will love me forever, and Mama needs a husband who sees how wonderful she is." "Grace," Jesse said softly, "those are very good reasons." "I know," Grace said with satisfaction. "But the most important reason isn't on the list because it's too big for words." "What's that?" Amelia asked. "We belong together. Not because we need each other, but because we choose each other every day. And choosing someone forever is what real families do." Jesse felt overwhelmed by the depth of Grace's understanding. This child who had started their story with a simple question had continued to guide them toward the love and commitment they'd all been seeking. "Grace, there's something I need to ask both of you," Jesse said, his voice thick with emotion. "I want to adopt Grace legally, so she'll be my daughter in every possible way, and I want to ask Amelia to marry me, so we can be a real family forever. But I need to know, are you both ready for that?" Grace launched herself into Jesse's arms with a squeal of joy. "Yes, yes, I've been ready forever." Amelia watched the two most important people in her world embrace, and felt her heart expand with more love than she'd thought possible. "We're ready, Jesse. We've been ready since the day Grace decided you were worth trusting." "Then I have something for both of you," Jesse said. Reaching into his jacket pocket, he pulled out a small velvet box and opened it to reveal a beautiful engagement ring with a classic solitaire diamond. Amelia gasped. "Jesse, when did you?" "I've been carrying it for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment," Jesse admitted. "I wanted to be ready when we were all ready." But Jesse wasn't finished. He pulled out a second, smaller box and handed it to Grace. "This is for you, sweetheart." Grace opened the box to find a delicate gold necklace with a heart-shaped pendant engraved with "Daddy's Girl" on one side and "Forever Family" on the other. "It's beautiful," Grace breathed. "But Daddy, shouldn't you give Mama her ring first?" Jesse laughed, delighted by Grace's attention to proper procedure. He dropped to one knee in Amelia's office, taking her hand in his, while Grace stood beside them with obvious satisfaction. "Amelia Burns," Jesse began, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "6 months ago, your daughter asked if a seat was taken, and you both changed my life forever. You've shown me that love multiplies rather than diminishes, that the best families are built on choice rather than chance, and that it's possible to find joy again even after thinking it was lost forever." Amelia felt tears streaming down her face as Jesse continued. "You've made me a better man, a better leader, and hopefully a worthy father for the most remarkable child I've ever known. Amelia, will you marry me? Will you let me love you and Grace for the rest of my life? Will you help me build the kind of family where everyone feels chosen and cherished and safe?" "Yes," Amelia whispered, then louder. "Yes, Jesse, yes to everything." As Jesse slicked the ring onto Amelia's finger, Grace clapped her hands in delight. "Perfect. Now we're officially going to be the Cochran family." Jesse stood and pulled both Amelia and Grace into his arms. holding them close as the magnitude of the moment settled around them. They were no longer three separate people who cared about each other. They were a family in every sense of the word, bound together by love that had grown stronger through every challenge they'd faced. "When should we have the wedding?" Grace asked practically. "I want to be the flower girl, and I already know what kind of dress I want to wear." Amelia and Jesse laughed at their daughter's efficiency. "What do you think, Grace? What would be the perfect timing for a Cochran family wedding?" Grace considered this seriously. "Christmas," she announced, "'cause that's when families come together, and because it would be the best Christmas present ever." "Christmas it is," Jesse agreed, looking at Amelia for confirmation. "Christmas sounds perfect," Amelia said, marveling at how completely her life had transformed. A year ago, she'd been a struggling single mother with big dreams and limited opportunities. Now she was engaged to a man who saw her true worth, professionally successful in ways she'd never imagined possible, and part of a family built on genuine love and mutual respect. Over the following weeks, as news of their engagement spread through the airport, Amelia was touched by the genuine happiness their colleagues expressed. The airport family that Grace had identified on her first day had embraced their love story as a source of hope and inspiration. "Amelia, I have to tell you," Gina from the cafe confided during one of their regular conversations, "watching you and Jesse fall in love has reminded all of us that good things can happen when we're brave enough to take chances." But it was during the adoption hearing preparation that Amelia truly understood the depth of Jesse's commitment to their family. He had hired the best family law attorney in the state, not to rush the process, but to ensure that Grace's interests were protected and that the adoption would be unbreakable. "Jesse, this must be costing a fortune," Amelia observed as she reviewed the legal documents. "Amelia, Grace is going to be my daughter forever. Making sure that adoption is legally bulletproof is the most important investment I'll ever make." The adoption hearing was scheduled for December 20th, with the wedding planned for December 23rd. Grace had insisted on the timing, declaring that she wanted to officially become Jesse's daughter before the wedding, so that when they exchanged vows, they would already be a complete family. "Mama," Grace said one evening as they looked at wedding magazines together, "are you nervous about marrying Daddy?" "A little," Amelia admitted. "Not because I don't love him or don't want to marry him, but because getting married means trusting someone with your whole heart. That's always a little scary." "But you already trust Daddy with your whole heart," Grace observed. "You trusted him to help me with homework, to give you a better job, to stand up for people like Maria when they needed protection. You trusted him to love us when we needed loving. Getting married is just promising to keep trusting each other forever." Amelia marveled at her daughter's wisdom. Grace was right. The trust that mattered most had already been built through countless small moments and everyday choices. The wedding ceremony would simply make public what had already become true in their hearts. As Christmas approached, Jesse found himself experiencing joy in ways he'd forgotten were possible. Shopping for Grace's Christmas presents, planning honeymoon details with Amelia, preparing to stand before their friends and family to declare their commitment. It all felt like a miracle he'd never dared to hope for. Emma's sister Cara had flown in early for the wedding preparations, and Jesse was grateful for her blessing on his new beginning. "Emma would have loved them both," Cara told him as they walked through Emma's garden together. "She always said you were meant to be a father, and she would have adored Grace's spirit and Amelia's strength." "I hope she would understand that loving them doesn't diminish what we had," Jesse said quietly. "Jesse, Emma's love for you was never about keeping you frozen in grief. She wanted you to live fully, to experience all the joy life could offer. Amelia and Grace aren't replacing what you had with Emma. They're giving you the family Emma always wanted you to have." The night before the adoption hearing, Amelia found Jesse sitting in the family area where their story had begun, looking contemplative but peaceful. "Second thoughts?" she asked, settling into the chair beside him. "The opposite," Jesse said, reaching for her hand. "I was just thinking about how many miracles had to align for us to find each other. Grace being brave enough to ask a stranger about a seat. You being willing to trust someone new. Me being ready to let love back into my life. It's extraordinary when you think about it. Grace says the best things happen when you're brave enough to say yes to unexpected possibilities, Amelia replied. I think we've all learned to be pretty brave. Tomorrow, Grace officially becomes my daughter, Jessie said wonderfully. And in 3 days, you officially become my wife. I can't imagine being happier than I am right now. Amelia squeezed his hand, marveling at the journey that had brought them to this moment. Jessie, thank you for seeing our worth when we couldn't see it ourselves. Thank you for loving Grace like she was always yours. Thank you for making me believe in love again. Thank you for asking if that seat was taken, Jessie replied, though they both knew Grace deserved credit for that particular act of courage. As they sat together in the space where their family had been born, surrounded by the gentle sounds of the airport that had become their second home, Amelia felt complete in ways she'd never imagined possible. Tomorrow would bring legal confirmation of what their hearts already knew, and soon they would stand before their friends and family to promise forever. But tonight, they were simply 3 people who had chosen each other, who had built something beautiful from simple questions and everyday courage, who had learned that the greatest love stories often began with a child wise enough to ask a stranger if a seat was taken. December 20th dawned crisp and clear, the kind of winter morning that felt full of promise and new beginnings. Amelia woke up knowing that by evening, Grace would legally be Jessie's daughter, and their chosen family would have the protection and permanence that only legal recognition could provide. Grace had been awake since dawn, trying on her special dress for the adoption ceremony and practicing her speech for the judge. She'd insisted on writing something to read at the hearing, explaining why she wanted Jessie to be her official daddy. Mama, do I look like someone who's about to get the best daddy in the world? Grace asked, spinning in her navy blue dress with its white collar and matching hair ribbon. You look absolutely perfect, baby girl, Amelia said, her heart swelling with pride and anticipation. Are you ready for this big day? I've been ready since the day I met Daddy, Grace replied with characteristic confidence. Today just makes it official for everyone else to understand. Jessie arrived at their apartment an hour before they needed to leave for the courthouse, carrying a small gift bag and wearing an expression of nervous excitement that made Amelia's heart flutter. How are my girls this morning? He asked, embracing them both. Ready to become Cochrans, Grace announced. Daddy, are you nervous? A little, Jessie admitted. Not because I don't want this more than anything, but because it's such an important day. I want everything to be perfect for you. It will be perfect because we'll be together, Grace said matter-of-factly. But I have something for you too. Grace presented Jessie with a hand-drawn card that showed 3 stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. Inside, in her careful first-grade handwriting, she had written, "To the best daddy ever, thank you for choosing me before you had to. Love, your daughter Grace." Jessie felt his eyes fill with tears as he read the simple words that captured the essence of their relationship. Grace, this is the most beautiful card I've ever received. I made it special because today is special, Grace explained, and I wanted you to know that you've been my real daddy in my heart for a long time already. Jessie pulled Grace into a hug that conveyed all the love and gratitude he felt for this remarkable child who had changed his entire world. And you've been my real daughter from the moment you asked if that seat was taken. The courthouse was festively decorated for the holidays, and Judge Denise Williams greeted them with warmth that immediately put Grace at ease. Well, Grace, this is a very special day, Judge Williams said, smiling at the little girl who was practically bouncing with excitement. Are you ready to tell me why you want Mr. Cochran to adopt you? Grace nodded seriously and pulled out the speech she'd prepared. Standing as tall as her 6-year-old frame allowed, she began to read in her clear, confident voice. Your Honor, I want Jesse Cochran to adopt me because he's already been my daddy in all the ways that matter. He helps me with homework, reads to me when I'm sick, and teaches me important things about being brave and kind. He loves my mama and makes her smile in ways she never smiled before. He keeps us safe and makes us feel special and important. Grace looked up from her paper, her dark eyes serious and earnest. But most important, he chose us when he didn't have to. He saw that we needed a family and that he needed a family. and he decided we should be each other's people forever. That's what real daddies do. They choose their children every single day. Judge Williams wiped her eyes as Grace finished her speech. Grace, that's one of the most beautiful explanations of family I've ever heard. Mr. Cochran, do you promise to love, protect, and care for Grace as your daughter for the rest of your life? I do, Jesse said, his voice steady, despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. Your Honor, Grace has been my daughter, in my heart, since the day I met her. Making it legal is simply catching the paperwork up to reality. And Amelia, as Grace's mother, do you consent to this adoption? I do, Amelia said, tears streaming down her face. Jesse has proven every day that he loves Grace completely and unconditionally. I can't imagine anyone more worthy of being her father. Then by the power vested in me, Judge Williams said with obvious pleasure, I hereby declare that Grace Isabella Burns is now legally adopted by Jesse Michael Cochran. Grace, you are now officially Grace Isabella Cochran, and Jesse is officially your daddy forever. Grace launched herself into Jesse's arms with a squeal of pure joy. We did it, Daddy. I'm really your daughter now. Jesse held her tight, feeling complete in ways he'd never imagined possible. You're really my daughter now, sweetheart. Nothing and nobody can ever change that. The celebration that followed at the airport was everything their extended family could have hoped for. Carl had arranged for a congratulations banner in the terminal. Gina had prepared a special cake, and dozens of employees stopped by to share in their joy. Grace Cochran, Jesse said, testing out her new name. How does that sound? Perfect, Grace replied with satisfaction. It sounds like I belong somewhere special. As the afternoon celebration wound down, Amelia found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment. A year ago, she would never have imagined that her daughter could gain not just a father, but the kind of security and unconditional love that Jesse provided. Mrs. Soon-to-be Cochran, Jesse said, approaching with 2 cups of coffee, how are you feeling about everything? Overwhelmed in the best possible way, Amelia admitted. Jesse, watching you with Grace today, seeing how happy she is, knowing that she'll never have to worry about being abandoned again, it's everything I ever hoped for her. She's remarkable, Amelia. You've raised an extraordinary daughter. We've raised an extraordinary daughter, Amelia corrected gently. Jesse, you've been her father in every way that matters for months now. Today just made it official. 3 days later, the airport chapel was transformed into a winter wonderland for the Cochran family wedding. White flowers and twinkling lights created an atmosphere of celebration and joy, while the guest list included not just family and close friends, but the airport employees who had become their extended family. Grace stood at the front of the chapel in her flower girl dress, a miniature version of Amelia's wedding gown, practically vibrating with excitement about her role in making their family official in every possible way. Daddy, Grace whispered as Jesse adjusted his tie, are you ready to marry Mama and make our family complete? I've been ready since the day I met you both, Jesse replied, meaning every word. Are you ready to be my official daughter and my best flower girl? I've been practicing all week, Grace said proudly. I'm going to scatter petals perfectly and then stand right between you and Mama during the ceremony because that's where I belong. Amelia emerged from the small preparation room, looking radiant in an elegant cream-colored dress that highlighted her natural beauty. But it was the joy in her eyes, the absolute certainty in her expression that took Jesse's breath away. You look beautiful, Jesse said as she approached. You look happy, Amelia replied, and Jesse realized she was right. For the first time in years, he felt genuinely, completely happy. Reverend Matt began the ceremony with words that perfectly captured their unique journey. We are gathered here today, not just to witness the marriage of Jesse and Amelia, but to celebrate the completion of a family that was built on choice, strengthened by love, and blessed by the wisdom of a child who knew that sometimes the most important questions are the simplest ones. Jesse's vows reflected the depth of their partnership. Amelia, you taught me that love isn't just about finding someone to share your life with, but about choosing to build something beautiful together every single day. You showed me that the best partnerships are based on mutual respect, shared values, and the commitment to help each other become the best versions of ourselves. I promise to support your dreams as passionately as I protect your heart, to be your partner in all things, and to love you and Grace with everything I have for all the days of my life." Amelia's response brought tears to every eye in the chapel. Jesse, when Grace asked if that seat was taken, neither of us knew she was asking the question that would lead us home to each other. You gave us security when we needed safety, opportunity when we needed hope, and love when we needed healing. But more than that, you saw our worth when you couldn't see it ourselves. I promise to be your partner in building dreams, your companion in facing challenges, and your support in honoring the love we shared before, while celebrating the love we found together. When Reverend Matt asked for the rings, Grace stepped forward importantly. "I get to give Daddy the ring for Mama, and Mama the ring for Daddy, because this was my idea first," she announced, causing gentle laughter throughout the chapel. As Jesse and Amelia exchanged rings, Grace stood between them with obvious satisfaction, her small hands resting on both of their arms in a gesture that perfectly symbolized their three-way bond. "Jesse and Amelia," Reverend Matt continued, "you've already proven your commitment to each other and to Grace through months of building trust, sharing responsibilities, and choosing love, even when it required courage. Grace, you've shown remarkable wisdom in bringing these two wonderful people together and helping them realize they were meant to be a family." The moment arrived for the final pronouncement, but Grace had one more surprise. "Wait," she called out, pulling a folded paper from her small purse. "I wrote something I want to read before you make it official." Reverend Matt smiled indulgently. "Go ahead, Grace." Grace unfolded her paper and read in her clear, confident voice, "Today, my Mama and Daddy are getting married, which makes us officially a family forever. But I want everyone to know that we've been a real family for a long time already. We learned that families aren't just about being born together. They're about choosing to love each other every single day. Even when it's hard. Daddy chose us when he didn't have to. Mama chose to trust when she was scared. And I chose to ask a stranger if he wanted to be part of our story. We all chose each other, and that's what makes us real." Grace looked up from her paper, her eyes bright with happiness. "So today isn't just about Mama and Daddy promising to love each other. It's about all three of us promising to be a family forever and ever, no matter what. And that's the best promise anyone can ever make." There wasn't a dry eye in the chapel as Grace carefully folded her paper and resumed her position between her parents. Reverend Matt wiped his own eyes before continuing. "By the power vested in me, and with the blessing of this remarkable family's wisdom, I now pronounce you husband and wife, and officially declare you the Cochran family. Jesse, you may kiss your bride, and Grace, you may hug both your parents." The kiss that sealed their marriage was gentle and full of promise, witnessed by their daughter's delighted applause and the warm approval of everyone who had watched their love story unfold. "We get it," Grace announced to the gathered crowd. "We're officially the Cochran family." As they walked back down the aisle together, Jesse and Amelia hand in hand, Grace skipping between them. Jesse marveled at the journey that had brought them to this moment. A simple question from a lonely child had led to the greatest love story of his life. A love that encompassed not just romantic partnership, but the deeper, more complex love of chosen family. The reception in the airport terminal was a celebration unlike anything the facility had ever seen. Airport employees, family members, and friends mingled in the space where Jesse and Amelia's relationship had begun, sharing food, laughter, and stories about the family they'd all watched form. "You know," David Kumar said to Jesse as they watched Amelia and Grace dance together to music playing from a small speaker system, "A year ago, I was worried you were making decisions based on grief instead of wisdom. Now I can see that Grace and Amelia didn't just save you from loneliness. They helped you become the man you were always meant to be." "They gave me back my sense of purpose," Jesse agreed, watching his wife and daughter with wonder. "I thought my chance at family had died with Emma, but Grace taught me that the best families are the ones we choose, and Amelia showed me that it's possible to honor the past while embracing an even more beautiful future." As the evening progressed, Grace insisted on one final ceremony. She led Jessie and Amelia to the chairs where their story had begun, now decorated with flowers and lights for the wedding celebration. "This is where it all started," Grace announced to the gathered crowd. "This is where I asked if the seat was taken, and Daddy said yes, and everything changed forever." "Actually," Jessie said, crouching down to Grace's level, "I think I said no. The seat wasn't taken." Grace giggled. "That's right, you said no, the seat wasn't taken. But yes, I could sit down. And really, you were saying yes to becoming our family, even though none of us knew it yet." Amelia felt her heart overflow with love for her wise, wonderful daughter and the man who had chosen to love them both completely. Grace is right. That simple question led to the most beautiful answer any of us could have imagined. As the celebration finally wound down and guests began to leave, the newly complete Cochrane family found themselves alone in the terminal that had become so central to their story. Grace was exhausted, but glowing with happiness. Amelia was radiant with joy and satisfaction, and Jessie felt more blessed than he'd ever imagined possible. "So what happens now?" Grace asked sleepily, leaning against Jessie's shoulder. "Now we go home," Jessie said, the word home carrying more meaning than it had in years. "All three of us, together, to start our first day as the official Cochrane family." "Will we still come to the airport every day?" Grace asked. "As often as you want," Amelia promised. "This will always be where our family began, where we learned to love each other, where we became who we were meant to be." "Good," Grace said with satisfaction, "because I want everyone to always remember that this is where the best love story ever happened. Where a little girl asked if a seat was taken and found her daddy. Where a mama learned to trust again, and where a sad man discovered that love multiplies instead of divides." As they gathered their things and prepared to leave for their new life as a legally recognized family, Jessie looked around the terminal one final time. A year ago, this had been his refuge from a world that felt empty and meaningless. Tonight, it was the sacred space where three separate hearts had learned to beat as one. Grace had asked if a seat was taken. But what she'd really been asking was whether there was room in a stranger's heart for the love of a motherless child and her devoted mother. The answer had been yes, not just room, but an infinite capacity for the kind of love that transforms ordinary moments into miracles and turns strangers into family. As they walked toward the parking garage, where their car waited to take them home, Grace skipped between her parents with the joy of a child whose deepest wishes had all come true. "Mama, Daddy," she said happily, "thank you for being brave enough to let love happen. Thank you for teaching us how." Amelia and Jessie replied in unison, their voices full of gratitude for the wise little girl who had orchestrated the most beautiful love story any of them could have imagined. The airport hummed around them, with its eternal rhythm of departures and arrivals, but for the Cochrane family, the journey was complete. They had found their destination not in any distant place, but in each other's hearts, where love had built a home that would last forever. Sometimes the most important questions were indeed the simplest ones, and sometimes the answer to "is this seat taken?" could change everything forever. 6 months later, the Cochrane family had settled into a rhythm of life that felt as natural as breathing. Amelia had successfully implemented her employee development programs across the entire airport system, earning recognition from industry organizations and job offers from companies around the country, all of which she politely declined because she'd found her calling at Cochrane International. Grace was thriving in second grade, her exceptional intelligence now properly challenged through accelerated reading programs and enrichment activities that Jessie had quietly arranged. But more than academic success, she radiated the security and confidence that came from knowing she was unconditionally loved by two parents who had chosen her completely. Jessie had discovered that fatherhood was everything he'd hoped it would be, and more than he'd ever imagined. Helping Grace with homework, attending school events, teaching her to ride a bike in their backyard, every moment reinforced his conviction that some of life's greatest joys came in the smallest packages. The airport continued to be central to their story, but now it was a place of daily accomplishment rather than lonely refuge. Jessie walked through the terminals with purpose, Amelia's programs had created a workplace culture that other organizations studied and tried to replicate, and Grace was a beloved fixture who knew every employee by name. On a warm June evening, as they sat in the family area that had become their traditional meeting place, Grace looked up from her latest book with a question that had clearly been brewing for some time. "Mama, Daddy, can I ask you something important?" "Always," they replied in unison, a response that had become automatic over the months of family life. "Do you think other people could find families like we did? I mean, are there other kids who need daddies and other grown-ups who need families, and they just haven't found each other yet?" Amelia and Jessie exchanged glances, both recognizing the compassionate heart that had first drawn them to their remarkable daughter. "What are you thinking, sweetheart?" Jessie asked. "I'm thinking that maybe we should help them find each other. Like, what if we had special events here at the airport where families who need more people could meet people who need families? What if we could help other people ask the right questions to find their people?" Amelia felt her heart swell with pride. "Grace, that's a beautiful idea. What would these events look like?" Grace's face lit up with enthusiasm. "We could have family activity days where kids without daddies could meet nice grown-ups who might want to be fathers. We could have job fairs for mamas who need better work so they can take care of their children. We could have reading circles where people practice being families together." Jesse was quiet for a moment, his mind already working through the logistics and possibilities. "Grace, you're describing something like a community building program, a way to bring people together who might not normally meet." "Exactly." Grace bounced in her chair. "Because look how perfect our family turned out when I was brave enough to ask if that seat was taken. Maybe other people just need help being brave enough to ask their important questions too." Over the following weeks, Grace's idea began to take shape as a formal program. Amelia used her employee development expertise to design community outreach initiatives. Jessie provided funding and organizational support, and Grace insisted on being personally involved in planning activities that would help families find each other. The first Families by Choice event was held in September, featuring family-friendly activities, resource fairs for single parents, mentorship program information, and opportunities for people to connect over shared values rather than traditional demographics. Amelia watched with amazement as Grace moved through the crowds with the confidence of someone born to bring people together. She introduced shy children to patient adults, helped overwhelmed parents find resources they needed, and seemed to instinctively know which people might benefit from knowing each other. "She's remarkable," Jessie said, appearing beside Amelia as they watched Grace help a nervous single father connect with other parents who understood his challenges. "She gets it from you," Amelia replied, "the ability to see what people need and the desire to provide it. Grace learned that from watching how you love." "She learned compassion from you," Jessie countered. "The way you protect people who can't protect themselves. The way you fight for fairness and dignity. That's all Grace's inheritance from her mother." They stood together, watching their daughter help build connections that might become the foundation for other chosen families, and felt the deep satisfaction that came from using their blessings to benefit others. As the event wound down, Grace approached them with a tired but satisfied expression. "How did we do?" Jessie asked. "Perfect," Grace replied. "Miss Maria from cleaning introduced her son to Mr. Thompson from security, and they're going to start doing homework together. Mrs. Washington, who lost her husband, found 3 other widows who want to have coffee every week. And the little boy whose mama works 2 jobs got connected with the after-school program that Miss Aaliyah recommended." Amelia crouched down to Grace's level. "Grace, I'm so proud of how you helped people today. You have a gift for seeing what people need and bringing them together." "I learned from the best teachers," Grace said matter-of-factly. "You and Daddy showed me that families are about choosing to love people, and that the best thing you can do with love is share it with other people who need it." That night, as the Cochran family drove home from the most successful community event the airport had ever hosted, Jessie reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. What had begun with a child's simple question had evolved into a love story that was now helping other people write their own love stories. "You know what the best part is?" Amelia said, as if reading his thoughts. "What's that?" "Grace isn't just our daughter anymore. She's becoming a leader who uses her gifts to help other people find their families. We're not just raising a child, we're raising someone who's going to make the world better. Like mother, like daughter. Jessie said warmly. Grace learned to care about other people's welfare by watching you fight for employee rights and dignity. She's going to change the world because you taught her that's what people with power and privilege are supposed to do. Grace piped up from the back seat, where she'd been unusually quiet. Mama, Daddy, I have something important to tell you. What's that, sweetheart? I love our family exactly the way it is, and I don't want it to change ever. But I also think it would be really nice if someday we could help another kid find their family the way I found mine. Amelia and Jessie exchanged meaningful glances. They discussed the possibility of adding to their family through adoption. But hearing Grace express the idea in her own words felt like confirmation that their hearts were all moving in the same direction. Grace, what made you think about that? Amelia asked gently. Today I met a little boy named Marcus who's in foster care, and he reminded me of how I used to feel before I found you two. Like he was waiting for his real family to recognize him, but didn't know if they ever would. Grace's voice carried the wisdom that never failed to amaze her parents. I thought maybe if we had room in our family for one more person, we could help someone else feel as loved and safe as you two make me feel. Jessie felt his throat tighten with emotion. Sweetheart, adding another child to our family would be a big decision that we all have to make together. How would you feel about sharing Mama and me with another little boy or girl? Daddy, love doesn't get smaller when you share it, it gets bigger, Grace said with the matter-of-fact tone she used for obvious truths. You and Mama taught me that when you loved me, it didn't take away from how much you loved each other. It just made our whole family more full of love. Amelia felt tears prick her eyes at Grace's profound understanding. You're absolutely right, baby girl. Love does multiply when it's shared. Plus, Grace continued with increasing enthusiasm, I've been an only child my whole life, and I think it would be fun to be a big sister. I could teach another kid about our airport family, and about how to be brave enough to ask important questions, and about how the best families are the ones where everybody chooses each other every day. Over the following months, the Cochran family began the process of becoming approved for adoption. The social worker assigned to their case, Mrs. Patricia Holmes, was charmed by Grace's involvement and insight. In 30 years of placing children in adoptive homes, I've never had a 7-year-old who understood the responsibilities and joys of adoption so clearly, Mrs. Holmes told Amelia and Jessie during one of their home visits. Grace has obviously learned what it means to be chosen and cherished, and she's eager to help another child experience that same security. 6 months later, Mrs. Holmes called with news that would change their lives again. We have a 5-year-old boy named David who's been in foster care for 2 years, she explained. His circumstances are similar to what Grace experienced. His father abandoned the family. His mother struggled with addiction and eventually lost custody. He's been through several placements, and he's become quite reserved and cautious about trusting adults. Tell us about him, Amelia said, her heart already opening to the possibility of loving another child. David is exceptionally bright, but struggles with believing that adults will keep their promises. He's been disappointed too many times by people who said they cared about him, but then gave up when things got difficult. He needs a family that understands trauma, that has patience for the healing process, and that can demonstrate through consistent actions that love doesn't have conditions or expiration dates. Jessie felt a familiar stirring in his chest, the same protective instinct that had awakened when he'd first met Grace. When can we meet him? The first meeting was arranged at a neutral location, a children's museum where David could feel comfortable and not pressured to perform for potential parents. Grace had insisted on coming along, declaring that she needed to make sure David would fit well with their family's energy. David was a small, serious boy with guarded brown eyes and a wariness that reminded both Amelia and Jessie of Grace's initial caution when meeting new people. He answered their questions politely but briefly, clearly protecting himself from disappointment. But it was Grace who broke through his defenses, approaching him with the same directness that had characterized her first conversation with Jessie. Hi David, I'm Grace, and these are my parents, I used to not have a daddy, and my mama and I had to be really careful about trusting people. But then I met Daddy, and I figured out that sometimes grown-ups really mean it when they say they want to love you forever. David studied Grace with the intensity of someone trying to determine if she was telling the truth. Did you get adopted too? Yep, and it's the best thing that ever happened to me. Now I have a mama who's really smart and strong, and a daddy who reads to me every night and helps me with math homework and never gets tired of my questions. What if they change their minds? David asked quietly, the question revealing his deepest fear. Grace considered this seriously. They won't, because real families don't work that way. Real families choose each other forever, not just until things get hard. My parents chose me even when I was scared and didn't trust them yet. They kept choosing me every day until I felt safe enough to choose them back. How do you know they won't leave? Because they already legally adopted me, which means I'm their daughter forever, no matter what. And because they love me when I make mistakes, when I'm cranky, when I'm sick, when I'm being difficult, they love me all the time, not just when I'm being perfect. David looked at Amelia and Jesse with cautious hope. Would you really want to adopt me too? Jesse crouched down to David's eye level, speaking with the same gentle honesty that had first convinced Grace to trust him. David, we don't know each other well enough yet to make promises about adoption, but we do know that we'd like the chance to get to know you better, to see if we might be the family you need, and you might be the son we'd love to have. What would that look like? David asked. Amelia joined the conversation, her voice warm with possibility. It would look like visits where we do fun things together and talk about what families mean to all of us. It would look like getting to know your favorite foods and your favorite books and what makes you laugh. It would look like all of us deciding together if we want to become a forever family. And I would help, Grace added importantly. I would teach you about our airport family and about how to have good conversations with Mama and Daddy and about all the best places to do homework and read books. Over the following months, David became a regular part of the Cochran family's activities. He joined them for Saturday morning breakfasts, helped Grace with her community outreach projects, and slowly began to believe that these adults might actually mean what they said about forever. The breakthrough came during a visit to the airport, when David saw how the employees treated the Cochran family, not just with respect for Jesse's position, but with genuine affection for all three of them as individuals. Everyone here really likes your family, David observed, as Gina from the cafe insisted on giving him a cookie and asking about his week. That's because we're part of their family too, Grace explained. Families can be big and include lots of people who care about each other. David, if you become my brother, you'll be part of our airport family too. Really? David's eyes widened with wonder. Really? Jesse confirmed. David, our family keeps growing because love keeps growing. There's always room for one more person who wants to be part of something beautiful. The adoption was finalized on a snowy December morning, exactly 1 year after Jesse and Amelia's wedding. 7-year-old Grace stood beside 5-year-old David in the same courthouse where her own adoption had been celebrated, beaming with pride as her little brother officially became a Cochran. David Michael Cochran, Judge Williams pronounced with obvious pleasure, "Welcome to your forever family." David's smile was radiant as he looked up at his new parents and big sister. We're really family now, forever and ever? Forever and ever, the three Cochrans replied in unison, their voices full of love and certainty. That evening, as the expanded Cochran family sat in their favorite chairs in the airport's family area, surrounded by the gentle bustle of travelers coming and going, Jesse marveled at the journey that had brought them all together. 2 years ago, he'd been a broken man, sitting alone in this very spot, convinced that his capacity for joy had died with his wife. Tonight, he was surrounded by a wife whose intelligence and strength inspired him daily, a daughter whose wisdom never ceased to amaze him, and a son whose healing heart reminded him that love could overcome any wound. Daddy, Grace said thoughtfully, do you think there are other kids out there who need families like David did? I'm sure there are, sweetheart. Why? Grace looked at David, who nodded encouragingly. David and I were talking, and we think maybe our Families by Choice program should include helping kids in foster care find their forever families. We could have special events where kids who need parents could meet grown-ups who want to be parents. Amelia felt her heart expand with pride for both her children. That's a wonderful idea. You two want to help other children find what you found? We want to help them find what we all found, David said quietly. Not just parents, but the feeling that you belong somewhere, and that people will love you even when you're scared or sad or make mistakes. Jessie pulled both children close, overwhelmed by their compassion and wisdom. You know what? I think that's exactly what we should do. We'll expand our program to help children find forever families, and families find the children they're meant to love. As they prepared to leave the airport that night, Grace insisted on one final stop at the chair where their story had begun. The four Cochrans stood together, in the spot where a simple question had launched the most beautiful love story any of them could have imagined. Thank you, Grace whispered to the empty chair, just as she had after Jessie and Amelia's wedding. Thank you for being available when I needed somewhere to sit, and thank you for helping me find not just one daddy, but a whole family that keeps growing with love. David looked confused by Grace's ritual, so she explained with the patience of a big sister who understood important traditions. This is where it all started, David. This is where I'd asked a sad stranger if I could sit down. And that question led to Mama getting a better job and me getting the best daddy ever, and Mama and Daddy falling in love, and now you becoming my brother. All because I was brave enough to ask if a seat was taken. David nodded seriously, understanding the significance. So this chair is magic? Not magic, Grace corrected gently. Just willing to be part of something beautiful when people are brave enough to ask the right questions. As they walked toward the parking garage where their car waited to take them home, David slipped his small hand into Jessie's while Grace held Amelia's hand, creating an unbroken chain of chosen love. Daddy, David said quietly, thank you for saying yes when Grace asked if there was room in your family for me too. Jessie squeezed his son's hand gently. David, there will always be room in our family for anyone who needs love. That's what families do. They grow to include all the people who are meant to be part of their story. The airport continued its eternal rhythm around them, but for the Cochran family, every arrival felt like coming home, and every departure was just the beginning of another adventure together. Grace had asked if a seat was taken, but what she'd really discovered was that the heart always has room for more love, that families are built on choice rather than chance, and that sometimes the most important journeys begin with the simplest questions. Have you ever experienced a moment where a simple question changed your entire life? Share your stories about unexpected families, second chances at love, and the courage to trust again in the comments below. Let me know where you're watching from, and subscribe for more heartwarming stories about love, finding a way when we least expect it. Tomorrow brings another tale of hope, healing, and the beautiful ways that strangers can become family when hearts are brave enough to remain open to love's infinite possibilities. And in the years that followed, whenever someone asked Grace Cochran about the secret to building a beautiful family, she would smile and say, "It's simple. You just have to be brave enough to ask if there's room for one more person to love, and then you have to mean it when you say yes." Sometimes the most profound love stories really do begin with the most ordinary questions. Sometimes a seat being available is just the universe's way of saying that there's always room for more love, more hope, and more family. And sometimes, when a tired little girl asks a lonely stranger if a seat is taken, the answer changes everything forever.